So it is first Sunday after Labor Day, so sounds like a good time to start a message series called Back to the Routine. And question, even if you're an empty nester, and I know there's people in the rooms who are empty nesters for the first time this week, even if you're an empty nester, this week feels a little different in the year, because you feel like, all right, kids are back in school, got to get things back organized, back on track. So ask yourself this question: are you back? I thought I was back until earlier this morning when I got myself fully dressed and I went to grab my black dress shoes. And you're looking down at my feet. Those are not black dress shoes, are they? Where are my black dress shoes? Of course, Joanne's already gone, already talking to all you guys, and there I am running around my house trying to find my black dress shoes, which I'm pretty sure are at my cabin above. So, maybe that's what Are You Back looks like for you. And this is a week, and we're in the era of social media, so when you have a first day of school, when a kid has a first day of school, we get a cute picture, and they got a little smiley face, and the year on the placard, and we see that, and we all like it. And then there are some social media posts that are just beautiful because of their honesty. This one brought to you by Megan Holmes. Don't look at her right now, but here's Megan's first day of fourth, first, and pre-K 4. Supposed to leave the house at 7, left at 7:15. Pretty sure only 2 out of 3 ate breakfast and 1 out of 3 brushed their teeth. Take 2 tomorrow, okay? And sometimes that can feel like us. And if you're a Christian and you're honest, sometimes that can feel like my walk with God. Like, I'm always getting out of the house late. I am always getting out of the house late. I'm always getting out of the house late. I'm always just a step behind. I don't quite have all my Bible readings in. And so what we're going to do with this series, Back to the Routine, is we're going to talk about getting a routine. We're going to talk about what a routine for a Christian looks like that keeps us connected to God. And some of you right now inside you're going, oh no, this is going to make me read the Bible for a half hour every day by the end of this series. I might come back in October when he's done. But just stick with me, because we're going to see how we formalize one of those plans. But let's talk about our church plans and our plans for our church family as we come back this first week of September. So monthly worship nights come back, and they come back this Thursday, and there is childcare available for that, so feel free to bring your kids. It's just an hour long, so if it's a school night, you'll be out of here at 8, 5 after 8, and then on your way home to put them to bed. Now, in the past, we have allowed worship night to get bumped by the classes that we do around here. We're not doing that this year. There will be, so those of you who have showed up for a worship night and said, sorry, it's not happening right now, that will not happen this year. They will be consistent once a month, every month. It's going to be on Thursdays. It'll either be the second or the third to keep us away from our responsibilities to City Covenant to bring the meals down there. The other thing that we do at this time of the year, especially for those of you who are new to the church this year, for the last few years, we've been talking about this thing called the 2020 vision, which is just, hey, we're a church. How do we structure ourselves and how do we focus ourselves to do what God has called us to do? So if you've never seen the 2020 vision before, it looks like this. We are purposely going deeper in Christ to build a stronger foundation that allows us to go further in mission, and we always do that together. So deeper, stronger, further together. And this year, each year we've done one of those. And this year, in year 5, we're going deeper into Christ. And what that means is it's a focus on discipleship. So throughout the year, our focus will be on, okay, what does our walk, our personal walks look like? What does our communal walk, our church walk with God look like? And this year what we're using is something that a lot of you have seen before, because a lot of you have taken the class here, and that class is Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. And this is going to be this year's focus. And what we're going to do with this, it's not going to be every message series between now and Memorial Day. It's not going to be this. We will, for example, in January and February, we'll take a look at the book of Acts and we'll go through it just like we went through the Gospel of Luke this summer, where we'll walk through it, and you can read along if you'd like to. Before Christmas, in the Advent season, we'll be taking a look at the prophets who came before Jesus. So it's not every series, but these series will be interspersed throughout the year. Now, you may say, why would we do that? What is it about this emotionally healthy spirituality that you think, or that makes sense from a discipleship standpoint? So now, a lot of you have, good to go back for a second, a lot of you have that book at your house because you've read it, you've gone through the class. If you're one of the people who hasn't gone through the class yet, there are books on the back table. Feel free to pick one up. You can just grab them. They're complimentary. If you feel like I should do something, we'll throw an extra couple of bucks in the basket next week. But they're there, and you feel free if you don't have them. So why that book? I think we could talk about this from this standpoint. I think when we think in terms of discipleship, there can be three levels of discipleship. And the first level, I would say, is this. It's the level of our head, our mind. I believe this to be true. And if you look at, public surveys that people like Gallup and Pew do, I believe this to be true. About 90% of people in our country would say, I believe in God. And 70% of the people in our country would say, I believe in Christ. I believe in Jesus Christ. I'm a Christian. All right? So that's one level of discipleship. I believe this to be true. A second level of discipleship would be this. You go from your mind to your heart. And so I live in service to God and others. So, all right, so 70% of people in our country call themselves Christian. Only about 45 are really connected to a church. So an even smaller number, right, who say, okay, not only do I believe this, I'm connected to a group of people who also believe it, and I'm trying to live this out in my life. Now, Jesus and the scriptures recognize those levels of discipleship, but also recognize that there's a level of discipleship beyond that. And so, if you think back to your last wedding, 9 times out of 10, at some point, somebody read 1 Corinthians 13. And in 1 Corinthians 13, what we read is that you can do all sorts of stuff for God, but if you don't have what? It doesn't work. If you don't have love. So it goes like this. If I speak in the tongues of angels or of men's, but do not have love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor, give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. You can believe with your mind, you can even do for God, but there's a level of discipleship that goes beyond. And in another book, the book of Galatians, the letter to this people in the town of Galatia, Paul writes what it looks like when you don't follow God. And he lists it in this instance as the works of the flesh, but we just recognize it as junk in our lives, right? And he gives the list like this. The acts of the flesh are obvious: sexual immorality, impurity, debauchery, idolatry, and witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambitions, dissensions, factions, and envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. I warn you, as I did before, that those who live like this will not inherit the kingdom of God. Now, if you're like me, you read that list. We all do this, right? It's a long list, so we just pick out a couple of things that we don't do. Okay? Oh, I'm not a witch who goes to orgies. I'm good, right? And I conveniently skip over, hence I highlighted them, the things that we do, right? Hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions, envy, right? Like, those hit a little bit closer on. There's a series of movies, the Godfather movies. If you're a guy around my age, you know the Godfather movies. And in the Godfather movies, the guy who just is the tragic hero, right, who dies at the end of 3 alone by himself, is Michael Corleone.
Thanks, Joe.
Come on, man. Nobody's not seen The Godfather. Steve, I'm sorry. I got Indiana Jones coming in a while, too. You're going to want to leave, Steve. So, but in Godfather 3, he is being swindled by the highest, like this cardinal in the Vatican Bank. So he goes to this other cardinal and he tells him his story. But how the cardinal responds is a beautiful picture of what it looks like when we let God into our hearts and what it looks like when we don't. So here it is.
Look at this stone. It has been lying in the water for a very long time, but the water has not penetrated it. Look, perfectly dry. The same thing has happened to men in Europe. For centuries, they have been surrounded by Christianity, but Christ has not penetrated.
Christ has not penetrated. Christ does not live within them. He's talking about people who show up at church every week. He's talking about people who work for the church. Christ is not penetrated. Christ does not live within them. So there is this third level of discipleship. There's the discipleship of the mind. There's the discipleship of the heart where, okay, I'm going to do now. And then there's this discipleship of the will. I surrender my life to God. Y'all sang it this morning. I surrender all. But do I surrender all? Do we surrender all? I mean, it's a beautiful song, and you all sound good when you sing it. Right? We all sound. But that's another level of discipleship. And when we get to that level of discipleship, Paul tells us what that looks like too. And he calls that the fruit of the Spirit. And the fruit of the Spirit looks like this. Like picture an apple with all these qualities. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. When we surrender our wills fully and completely to God, then that's what our lives look like. And we all know that we can be in the church, and that cannot be what our life looks like. So if we look at these 3 levels of discipleship, I think I do. This third level of the will is I am. Right? I am who God calls me to be. My life bears the fruit of God actively working in my life. And so as we go through now over this next year, that's what we want to take a look at, this deeper level of discipleship. So let's go here, right? So who are you? Who am I? And don't let that be a beat yourself up moment. Let it be a longing. Paul says this. He, Jesus Christ, became what we are, became a human being, took our place, freed us from our sin, so that we might become what he is. The longing that I want in my heart, the longing I encourage you to place in your heart, is the longing to say, he became what I am so that I might become what he is. Where am I on that journey? What areas am I still not like Christ, and do I need that transforming power in my life? And so in this book, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, there's this chapter, those of you who've gone through it, and a lot of people in this church I know have gone through it, right? Is know yourself that you may know God. Know yourself that you may know God. Now, a great biblical story to illustrate this point is the story of David and Goliath. And the problem with the story of David and Goliath is we've turned it into a cartoon, and it's just something that we give to the 3 and 4-year-olds in the back. And we don't talk about it. Well, let's talk about it, and let's put it into a context of knowing yourself that you may know God. So, if we get some lessons from David, first of all, we have to understand ancient warfare. Ancient warfare, looked the scene that we have in the Bible of David and Goliath, it's kind of like a scene out of World War I. 100 years ago, World War I was raging in Europe, and you had the Germans on one side, and you had the Americans and the French and the British on the other side. And they had these battle lines. And they really didn't move. They just shot back and forth across these battle lines, and in between was called no man's land, because every now and again, your commander would say, hey, go charge the other side. You would charge the other side. Most of you would die. A few of you would make it back. And then the other side would say, oh, they must be weak now. They would charge, and they would all die, and a few would make it back. So they call it no man's land. If you went in the middle, you weren't getting out. Most likely. So, in ancient Israel, Israelites are here, Philistines are here, and they're not crossing the line. Now, this might be like something that you would see in a Hollywood movie, but it happens, it happened, it was a form of ancient warfare where you would say, all right, instead of everybody charging everybody at the same time, we'll send out our big guy, you send out your big guy, they'll fight to the death. Whoever wins, that's who wins this battle. And that's who wins this war. That was a form. So Goliath, big guy, right? And today he would have been an NFL lineman or a center on an NBA team. Big, huge guy comes out. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? Are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he's able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us. That's ancient warfare. Battle lines are drawn. Nobody can get across. All right, let's settle this. And of course, the guy who says let's settle this just happens to be massive, right? Think of the biggest NFL lineman. Who's our NFL people, right? Just think of that biggest lineman walking up. You know, he comes in here and he says, okay, who wants to take me out? Yes. So that's ancient warfare. Now, this goes on for some time. Nobody's willing to come out. And this David, who will become the king of Israel, right? David comes out and he says, I'll do it. Now, his brothers poo-poo him and say, oh, you can't do it. Saul, the king, you can't do it. Finally, they say, okay. So Saul has this brilliant idea. Here's my armor. So David puts on his armor. Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. Okay, here's our first lesson from David. Don't wear someone else's armor. So he goes walking around, and he's just like, this doesn't feel right. This shield feels too heavy. This sword is dragging behind me. The helmet's coming down. I can't, this isn't me. I can't do this. Now that seems like a simple, right? Don't wear someone else's armor. But how often do we do that? Certainly in the culture, right? The teens who are coming up who are, the teens will be here at the next service and they'll be at youth group tonight, right? They feel all those pressures to keep up with the whoever's. I think the Kardashians are past 80. Whoever's going to be the next one to do that, right? Or maybe they're not past 80, I don't know. But that pressure is there. And I would say that pressure to wear someone else's armor is the original sin of our church. And when I say that, what I mean is, when we formed as a church, we had this church that we wanted to be exactly like and do things exactly like they do. And that became our idol. And the pursuit of that idol is why we struggled in the early years. Now even though I wasn't here at the beginning, I'm a part of that sin. I had that same idol. I chased that same dream. And we learned, hey, we're putting on somebody else's armor. What type of church are we called to be? So this is actually would be the 27th anniversary weekend of our church. So 14 years into that journey, about 13 years ago, we put together something that we still give you when you visit. It's in your welcome packet. It's in the little mission and values on the back of that, on those things out there. If you go to our website, it says, "Is this the church for you?" And it's a whole statement about who we are, and it's really simple. This is us saying, hey, we're going to quit trying to be somebody else. We're going to be who we are, and we're going to live into that. And as we do that, right, we believe that God will bless us, and God will work with us, and God will honor it. So, don't put on somebody else's armor. Do lead with your strength. So now, this is where David and Goliath takes on the cartoon character. Okay? Because what do we see? We see the big giant with all his armor walking across the field, and little scrawny David running out, and he's got his slingshot. And the little pea goes, and Goliath falls, and he's dead. Right? So, David has put on Saul's armor. And he says, I cannot go in these because I'm not used to them. So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in hand, approached the Philistine. All right, first thing. With his sling in hand, approached the Philistine. It's not a slingshot. It's a sling. And the difference is huge. He's not going unarmed at all. A sling, an ancient sling, is like the sharpshooters of ancient warfare. Right? You take this thing, you whip it over your head, and you let that rock go. Right? If you know how to do it, it's accurate and it's powerful. I'm not a gun guy, but I looked to see if Mythbusters did it. Mythbusters didn't do the experiments on this. National Geographic did the experiments on this. The stopping power of an ancient sling is almost the same as a .44 caliber handgun. Okay? Again, I'm not a gun guy, but I understand the .44 caliber handgun will knock you right over and kill you. Right? Gun people, that's a powerful weapon, a .44? Yes?
It'll hurt.
It will hurt. Thank you.
Dirty Harry.
Right? So David says, wait, you're fighting your way. I'm going to fight my way the way I know. Now, the sling in the ancient world was called a shepherd's sling. Because a shepherd, which David was, would know how to use a sling. Why? Because the shepherd's out there in the field. They got 100, they got 200, they got 300 sheep. Along comes a pack of wolves. What are you going to do? You're going to shoot them with the .44 to protect your sheep. And you're going to get good at using it. So as you read about this account, David, he's kind of bragging. He's, hey, I can do this. Look, I've taken out bears in the field. I've taken out lions in the field. Yeah, because he's got a .44. If you want to get a view of what it looked like, not the cartoon, but probably what it looked like, think about Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones has always got crazy guys following around. And there's one scene where the guy comes out with the swords. And Indiana, and he wants to take on Indiana Jones, and Indiana Jones has a solution for the guy. That's David and Goliath. That's, right? Goliath shows up with his sword and his helmet, and David shows up with the 44 and says, okay, I'm going to fight with my weapons, with what I know. Okay? So lead with your strength. And this next thing I'm about to say is really important, so hang with me. And remember, that's what a life of faith looks like. We too often think that a life of faith in that situation looks like, oh my gosh, they got a big giant. We're facing down a big giant. Oh my gosh, we got to start a church. We got to be exactly like that cool church over there in Chicago. That's how we got to do it. And so our prayer becomes, God, give us everything we need to be like that cool church in Chicago. God, give us everything we need to be as big and strong as that giant. Consider the birds of the field. They don't weep, right? They don't, I said weep. I think it's reap. They probably do weep, right? They don't weep. They don't sow. Faith looks like, God, I know you love me. Your word tells me that. God, I know I already have everything I already need. Your word tells me that. So what do I have for the battle that you have in front of me? For David, it was, hey, I got a sling. That's what I have for the battle in front of me. And God has given me the experiences that have made me proficient in the use of this. Faith looks like believing that God is right here, right now, active. And we need to open our eyes to what he's doing in our midst and get on board. That's faith. So now, we're trying to put together in the next, we're going to do it in week 3. We're gonna finish this as we get back to the routine. So I want the music team to come on up. But what I want you to do is think of it like this. You're gonna put this plan together, right? And your plan is gonna be, I want to be out of the house at 7. I want all the kids to have breakfast. And I want them to have their teeth brushed. And a lot of days, it's going to look like what it looked like Tuesday morning, okay? I had a plan last night. I'm going to wear my gray sweats with my black dress shoes, right? We put these plans together, and then slowly over time, God works with us, right? So now, as you're putting your plan together to stay connected to God, one question for today, and we'll go in the next couple of weeks, we'll add to this plan. But the question to start with, lead with your strength. As evangelical Christians, we often put together our plan to stay with God. The first thing on the list is always, I'm going to read my Bible X amount a day. Some of you have been trying to do that for decades. It still hasn't worked, right? And you're like, okay, but I'm going to do it again. This is the year I get it. Don't do that to yourself. How do you connect with God? How do you connect with God? What's your strength? Are you a nature person who needs to just get out in nature and that's where you see God? I'm one of those crazy people who's closest to God and I'm running through the woods. I have to be running. Is that you? Doesn't have to be. Because it's like, how do you, right? Don't put on my armor. Put on your armor. Your armor may be a walk in the woods. Your armor absolutely may be Bible study. Your armor may be, I just need a good Christian friend who I can have coffee with once a week. Your armor may be, I love to read, and so I'm going to read, right? What's your armor? So we're going to start with there. What's your strength? And we're going to go out worshiping together and praising our God together. But I want you to just focus on this week. What is the number one way I connect with God? Because if you're going to follow, right, you start there. Don't put on anybody else's armor. Put on the armor that God has already given you. Let's rise and lift our voices.